unless you take advantage of my advanced legal research class next year. I'll be saying goodbye after this class, at least in terms of instruction for legal methods. Hope what I've had to say was at least marginally helpful, and at the very least, you're comfortable enough with me to reach out to my email and ask me questions if you have it as you go on your legal education background here. So I'm going to start recording, so be aware of that.
It's already recording.
Oh, you're already recording?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And I will share my screen and we'll get the party going here. So as we can see here, our topic is regulations and executive orders. Now, this is just going to be a very brief 45 minute overview of regs. If you want to know more about regulations, you take advanced legal research. We spend twice as much time or even more. You'll find as you get out in the world, you're doing clerking and whatnot, or you're practicing law in some certain areas of law, you'll find it's very heavily regulatory based. Immigration and some other areas of law are very much controlled by regulations. So here's just an overview. I mean, essentially, this class is to familiarize yourself with government websites and the treasure trove of information you can find on the federal government websites. And then at the back end of this, the Pennsylvania reg stuff I'll touch on. So some of the state government resources as well. So we'll track this class similarly to the other ones, go through regulations in a question format, sort of concept, some in-class research opportunities for you to see if we can find a variety of things. And then I'll end with some of my three main tips that I want you to take away, a chance to ask any questions if you might have them. So right off the bat, who's responsible for promulgating regulations, either at the federal level or the state level? Carrie, your hand's up first.
Administrative agencies.
Administrative agencies. Dominic, do you have anything to add to that?
No, but I totally agree.
All right, well, that's a good agreement because that is correct. Federal and state agencies are the ones that are empowered with creating regulations. So when you think about the federal legislature and then your state legislature for the state government situation, when they pass laws, they're going to pass laws of an encompassing purpose, of an overall broad scheme purpose. So like the federal legislature, they're going to create the Environmental Protection Agency, and they're going to tell them we need to regulate rivers and streams and make the environment safe. But they're not going to tell, in the statute, they're not going to tell all of the ins and outs and the P's and the Q's about how to go about making the rivers and streams safe and preserving our environment. So that's where the regulations come in. The agencies are empowered to create regulation that further the purpose of the statute that gives them power. So basically, the statute is the overarching framework, and then the regulations are the specificity required to make the law work the way it was intended. Okay, so that's that. The second question: do regs have the force of law? Either one for yes or two for no. Yes, they have the power, the force of law. Two, they don't. And fire away. What do we think? All right, very good. I am getting, I think, ones across the board. Regulations have the force of law. And that is correct. The regulations, as the slide says, govern exactly how the law is to be enforced or overseen. That's not to say that regulations won't, that new regulations won't wipe away old regulations, or that the legislature might rule that a certain regulation is unconstitutional or invalid. But for the most part, regulations have the power of law as long as they are still in force or haven't been superseded somehow. So yes, power of law promulgated by the regulatory agencies. Following up on that, where does the framework for making rules, for making regulations come in? Where does the framework for rulemaking derive from? Does anybody by any chance know? Gull, yes.
Does it come from the statute that legislation has basically put forth for that agency to then have jurisdiction over? From that, then I think they come up with the framework for that regulation itself.
Yeah, Carrie, did you raise your hand as well?
Yeah, the enabling legislation. That's the better term for that, or the equivalent term.
The enabling legislation for the agency. So it empowers the agencies and it gives the scope of what they have purview over. And then also taking a step back, the Federal Administrative Procedures Act, that gives the framework of, they can't just make a regulation and that's it. There's certain rules and steps they have to follow. So those steps are given in the Procedures Act at the federal level. And I think pretty much every state has an Administrative Procedures Act of some sort that gives the premise and the steps behind the rulemaking process. So here, the rulemaking process in general on the left side of the slide. First, the Congress passes a statute which gives agencies power, or they pass a statute that says an agency ought to do this. So then the agency takes the lead from there. They propose a rule. This proposed rule is published by the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. The proposed rule is then published. The public is given a certain amount of time to comment on what are the good, what are the bad, what are the impacts to their agency, to their business, to their community that a proposed rule would have. And then after a time, the agency might take up some of these proposals, tweak the rules somewhat, and then publish a final rule, right? So proposed rule, comment period, final rule, and then publication. Regulation under review. You can get a broad picture of the federal regulatory scheme work with this reginfo.gov website. So, excuse me, keep this in your toolbox. So they'll give you in one-stop shopping here, agencies with the most regulatory action, pending rules, pending actions coming down the pike here. You can click through there. You can see what agencies are most active, what agencies have proposed rules going through the system and the like, and see what's going on there. So that's reginfo.gov. Under the APA, each agency is supposed to publish a unified agenda twice a year so that the public has an opportunity to view and understand in a broad picture, 10,000 foot view of what they're looking at. So The most current regulatory agenda is the fall 2020. They're likely working on the spring 21 right now. So from the reginfo website, you can go there, select a agency and see what's on that agency's unified agenda, see what the broad themes that they're working on are. So do a little bit of the nuts and bolts of rulemaking. What's the difference between the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and the FR, the Federal Register? Does anybody know the answer to that? Yes, Tom Lang.
Yeah, so the FR is like they describe it as like their magazine, but not a magazine, but like a newspaper where they post kind of like new and upcoming things or what's going on, and then finalize information afterwards. Then the CFR is the actual codified, finalized regulation.
And that's exactly right. If I had a prize, I'd give it to you. So the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, is for the final rules. The final rules, the executive orders for the year, etc., in the final format. So back in the days of print, each year the CFR would be printed in quarterly sections. So titles 1 through 15 would be published one quarter, and then titles 16 through 25 in the next quarter. So an entire year would fall within one volume of the CFR. So all of the state agencies' final rules would appear in one volume of the CFR, and it would take up multiple shelves of the library each year. Now, some rulemaking is exempt from the formalized process of the Administrative Procedures Act. So normally you've got to publish your proposed rule, give time for comment, let the things percolate, and then tweak and final rule. But under the APA, there are exceptions for this. Normally, I guess primarily for national security interests where time is the essence, or you want to preserve security, or if you have to act fast because a foreign government might take advantage of the situation or something. Under the APA, in certain circumstances, you can skip the entire process, and a final rule can basically be from cut to finish in a matter of days. Publication of the Federal Register, like Tom mentioned, it's published daily, Monday through Friday. All issues of the Federal Register are given a year. So each year it constitutes a volume of the Federal Register, at least in the print version. Just to give you an example of the scope of all of this, in 2020, so volume 85 was 2020's version of the Federal Register. And through September of that year, we're looking at over 50,000 pages of regulation. So that's why the print version probably isn't the most groovy and quick way to search the Federal Register, because who has time to go through indexes and other finding tools? So just to get a feel for it, 59,000 pages in 2020, at least through September of that year. Arrangement of the Federal Register, proposed rules, final rules, notices, public notices. There'd be a section for the executive documents, executive orders, executive statements, presidential statements, as well as a Federal Register index. So you go online to federalregister.gov. You would have access to all of these different parts. You could search through the index if that's the way you wanted to go, etc. So federalregister.gov, you'd see all of these sections laid out electronically. Now, searching the Federal Register, a variety of websites listed here. The federalregister.gov website is the official version maintained by the Office of Federal Register. That's a good place to start, but I'm likely to start here in at the regulations.gov website because it incorporates the current events, the current comments. It gives me a better feel of what's going on in terms of proposed regulation, the things that folks and lobbyists and other people are saying about proposed regs. So that's regulations, not just going to be the Federal Register content, but it's also going to be comments, public notices. If you're tracking regulations, you can go there, you can leave your own comment, etc. From archives.gov, you'll get links to, well, a link back to the Federal Register, the official version, White House documents on regulations.gov, as well as what's called the ECFR, the electronics. So the ECFR basically is the Westlaw and Lexis of regulations in the free universe. So they've incorporated all the Federal Register final rules that haven't been published in the Code of Federal Regulation, but they're automatically included in the CFR content that you pull. So if you don't want to hassle about updating your regulatory research, you would go in through the ECFR where the updates are automatically accounted for. Govinfo.gov is a great place to go if you have citation. So if you have a CFR citation, you have a statutory citation. If you have a citation for a law, govinfo.gov, or even backing out even further, go to USA.gov. USA.gov is like the Uber index of all that is the federal government. It's amazing what you can find. Just a few keywords, govinfo.gov or USA.gov, and it'll pull down a bunch of, a massive amount of stuff. Yes, Jenna.
I was looking at a couple of these while you were going through it, like the regulations.gov one looks interesting for my day job. Like, can you get a feed on that by topic? Like if I just want FDA, for example, is there a way to customize?
I bet there is. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay, it'd be good for, not urgent, but for class,
Off
just
the
be
top
good.
of my head, I don't know how, but I would imagine that there's a way to set up an alert system. I would be surprised if there isn't.
Yeah, it seems like everything is lumped together on all kinds of topics. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then, of course, Westlaw, Lexis, if your law firm has access to Bloomberg, obviously in those services, you could set up an alert. So Lexis and Westlaw, if you know your CFR citation, or if you know your Pennsylvania code citation, you could set up your alerts in those platforms. For this class, though, I'm sticking to mainly government type resources because I want you to see that Lexis and Westlaw aren't everything. And when it comes to regulations and agency type stuff, I think the federal government's done a pretty good job. Their search functionality is pretty good. And for the most part, it's as good as Lexis and Westlaw. So going to the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, divided into 50 broad titles. Title 3 is your presidential documents, so executive orders, presidential proclamations, things like that. And then looking on all the way down, here's an example of a CFR site if you're pulling something by Code of Federal Regulations. So Title 8, Code of Federal Regulations, and then it's Part 274.A12. So Title 8, I think that's immigration, and then Part 274 is dealing with whatever subpart it's dealing with. So question, how and where, in addition to regulations.gov and other government resources, how would you think to go about finding the regulation that might be helpful for your situation? A government website, Might a secondary source be helpful? Agency websites, all of the above? What do we think? Um, yes, Gull,
Is it all of the above?
all of the above, absolutely. And there's other things as well too. So just an example, in Pennsylvania, these yellow PBIs that you see in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, they publish these practitioners on basically every legal topic you can think of. So Environmental Protection Law Form 2019, and you can see a big chunk of this PBI publication is they've recreated the Environmental Policy Act right in. So often secondary sources are a great entryway into regulations that might be helpful for your area of law. So if you're practicing in environmental protection and that, probably your practitioner for environmental protection would have a section dealing with regulations, and those major citations would list there in that publication. Government websites, so obviously like regulations.gov, here's a second listing of all of these ECFR, Federal Register and the like. Agency websites, so EPA, all of the laws and all of the regulations dealing with what the Environmental Protection Agency has control over. So EPA is a great example of using an agency website. Especially in the immigration realm, embassy websites may have information. So immigration, go to the embassy website for the country you're interested in. You might get some information. Other agency websites. So for travel, the Department of State has a lot of regulatory information dealing with travel and interaction of the U.S. with foreign nationals and foreign countries and the like. So, and then just a general, I mean, obviously a Google search would probably be good too. If you restricted your Google search to .gov, to .gov websites. So just a one quick way of narrowing your Google search to .gov would be a good way of easily tweaking your Google search to maybe more pertinent information. So here's a example we'll run through here. So our client recently met a Russian woman on the internet who's now his fiance. It was love at first sight or love at first tweet. She has received a K-1 fiance visa. So her USA fiance has petitioned her for a K-1 fiance visa, and she's interested to know if she can keep working her job as an editor for Cosmopolitan, the Russian edition, when she comes to America to marry him next month. So when she flies from Moscow to Harrisburg, will she, under the immigration laws currently in effect, be able to keep working? So can we see if we can find a yes or no, just a quick yes or no answer to using whatever you want to. Lacey has already.
I found that yes, she can, as long as she files some form, then she can keep it for 90 days.
Right. She can file some form, exactly. So when I did this in real life, this is how I got my wife to America. I started with the secondary source. Immigration Law Source Book by Kurzban. This is the immigration law. This is the immigration law Bible. I was using Kurzban back in the late 90s. Use the index under K1. I find out that the K1 visa is work authorized under this specific CFR citation. So here's my index screenshot. Tells me to go to page 582. From page 582, I get my 8 CFR 274A citation, and then I can take my CFR site. In the 90s, I would have used the print copy likely, but now I would go to govinfo.gov, and here's my PDF of Part 274A1, that K1 visa holders are work authorized as long as they file a form for temporary work permit. All right, and then that 274A, it would walk me through the steps I would need. Likewise, on Lexis or Westlaw, go into the Code of Federal Regulations, run a real quick search on employment and fiance. That same 274A citation comes up, and I can get at it that way. Now the real life rub on this work permit is, yes, you could file the work permit, but in all honesty, the time it takes for the Citizenship and Immigration Services to get you the work permit, she's already eligible for a green card, so you might as well save that money and then just file for a green card, and then she'd be work authorized. But unless you practice in immigration, you won't know all of those little nuances. So that's another example why a secondary source would be helpful, because a secondary source would tell you that hidden answer. So scenario 2 here. The Trump administration, towards the end of their being in office, recently they imposed a new visa restriction aimed at birth tourism, where women were taking advantage of the immigration regulations, the immigration laws. They were traveling in the United States to give birth to their children so that they would have automatic birthright citizenships and become automatic US citizens, the children of these women. So the Trump administration wanted to close this loophole and do away with it. So can we find the Federal Register or the CFR citation for this new rule? Yes, go.
Is it 22 CFR section 41.31?
Let's find.
Temporary visitors for business or pleasure.
Right, that's it. So before they made the change, one of the categories for a visa was a travel visa for pleasure. So that was one of the loopholes. They say they were going on vacation, but they were almost ready to have birth. So they were going on vacation, but when in reality they were going and then having their baby. So USA.gov. Search all government. Birth tourism. So basically USA.gov is searching everything that's It's a federal government website. My first hit, birth tourism update from the Department of State. So here's an update on it from the Department of State, and then they link to the Federal Register, and you go there and you find what Gull found. So USA.gov, pretty handy. It's interesting. The second hit is a bill. It's a bill that's it was introduced in the Senate January of 21. So basically, not only are they looking to change the regulation that Gull found, but they also want to change it. They also want to shore up that travel subset for getting a visa and putting it in the actual United States code as well, not just in the reg. So that's what this bill, if it makes it through, would do, is change it at the United States code level as well, not just the regulation. So that was using the .gov website. I was able to find that information. So that's kind of a handy tool to be aware of. Let's see. Where were we? So CFR. Okay, right. So Department of State website links to the Federal Register. If I use the eCFR version, it would pull it right into the final version of the Code of Federal Regulations. So there it is. You can see travel visas do not include the pleasure, the vacation visas do not include obtaining visa for the primary purposes of obtaining a U.S. citizenship for a child by giving birth in the United States. I think this is our final scenario. Not long ago, the U.S. Department of Transportation proposed regs, excuse me, that only trained dogs would be allowed inside an airplane cabin as an emotional support animal. So they wanted to tighten up, Department of Transportation wanted to tighten up regulations when it came to emotional support animals allowed on planes. No more emotional support parrots or bunny rabbits or mices. It had to be, they wanted to be just the dogs. So can we find this proposed rule? And then tell me what website that you used to find the answer. Lacey again, she must have taken typing in high school. Yes.
Is it CFR 22 CFR 41?
Let's see here. Traveling by air with service animals, 14 CFR 382 is what I came up with. But let's see. Shakshi?
Yep,
What-
I got that one too, on the federalregister.gov, 14 CFR 382, which gives a summary of the department's Air Carrier Access Act, along with transport of service animals by air.
So regulations.gov.
Federalregister.gov is where I am.
So air travel support. Let's see. Traveling by air. Yeah. 14 CFR 382. The Federal Register citation is there. The CFR citation for the final rule is there. You'll see with the rules, they have to, under the APA, they have to give a summary. They have to explain time resources that it took to come up with these regulations. They publish the research and what they went through to arrive at the rule. And so then you scroll to the very, very bottom, and then you get to the rule where they say it has to be that the emotional support animal on an airline, on an air flight, has to be an actual dog. So that's regulations in a nutshell. Yeah. Okay, I lied. More scenarios. Our client, our Russian fiance client, has now traveled from Moscow to Harrisburg, right? You actually commented when that was being considered, Carrie. What was your comment?
There was 32,000 comments on it, but one of my other classes had us go in and look at a rule, and that was the one I chose to comment on about how it's ridiculous that alligators are emotional support pets.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned a parrot is I sat next to a parrot one time. It was very annoying. I'm sure it was comforting to the lady, but whatever. I'm not a parrot person. So anyway, our Russian fiance is now in Harrisburg, and they've gotten married within a month, which is the rule under the K-1 fiance visa. You have to be married to your fiance within a month, or you have to go back home. So they've gotten married, so now they want to adjust their status and get a green card. So what form needs to be filled out, and by what, to what agency? The green card form. Shakshi, are you raising your hand for that one too?
No, sorry, still Googling.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Of course, if you had Kurzban Immigration Sourcebook in your library, you would know the answer probably in 30 seconds. Carrie, yes.
I think it goes to ICE, and is it the form I-485 application to register permanent residence or adjust status?
Yep. Actually, I think it's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Maybe ICE is a sub part of it. So right on their website, they have a page devoted to the green card. Here's your form I-485. If you read the 100-page instructions and follow it carefully, anybody with a working knowledge of English can do it, follow the instructions, and file it. So it goes to USCIS, and then you wait your time in the queue, and you go through the steps to adjust your process. It took us about 9 months, I think. So from the agency website, you'll get your answer. Man, I've got all of these questions. Sorry, guys. Question, where would you find presidential executive orders that evidently no political party likes? Any thoughts on that, an executive order? Where would we look to find those? Let's see, Dominic.
Maybe on the White House website through
The
White House correspondence.
website.
Yeah.
Yep, that's one place. Any other places? Lacey,
The Federal Register's website.
the Federal Register, yeah, because the executive orders are required by whatever law that they have to appear in the Federal Register as an initial stopping point. So screenshot of federalregister.gov, there's a page dedicated to executive orders. I think they go back to the Clinton administration on the Federal Register website. There's also an index page which gives you what executive orders have superseded other executive orders. So you'd find that information on the federalregister.gov website as well. In the final version of the CFR, in Title 3 of the CFR, all of the executive orders would appear as well. Here's your White House website. So under Trump is modernizing terrorism and combating terrorism executive order was up there at one point. Agency websites might have them. So I think this is Customs and Enforcement's website. So of course they would have a link to the executive order dealing with combating foreign terrorists. So the agencies might have the executive orders there as well, because the executive orders often instruct an agency to take certain action. So agencies as well. All right, so really quick here, we're getting off of the federal scheme work and moving to Pennsylvania. What's the difference between the Pennsylvania Bulletin and the Pennsylvania Code? Carrie.
The bulletin is just basically the newspaper version. The code is once it's been codified and put into a more formalized version.
That's correct. So on the Pennsylvania Code and Bulletin website, they used to be on separate websites. It used to be pacode.com and pabulletin.com, but they're not. They're now all in one site. So the top half is code, bottom half is bulletin. The bulletin is the weekly publication of the proposed rules and agency actions, and then the Pennsylvania Code of Regulation is the final official version that had been promulgated. Some of the disadvantage with the PA code, well, since the state ran out of money, they don't publish an index in print anymore. So you can only find stuff online using keyword and Boolean search. Back in the day, you used to be able to go to the index and do a librarian sort of way to index your way through. You might find things that a keyword or a Boolean search wouldn't pull, but you can't do that anymore. Updating your regulations off the PA bulletin, it's a second step. You'd have to run your search on the PA. Well, if you find it in the PA code, then you would have to go back to the regulations, to the Pennsylvania Bulletin, to see if there's been an update, just to double check your research. So it would be a two-step process. So I promise, this is our final exercise here. Can we find the regulations that are dealing with oil and gas wells and protecting the environment? So are there any environmental protection measures dealing with oil and gas regulation in Pennsylvania? So from the PA Code and Bulletin.gov website. Sorry. We got Filipinos and 2-year-olds screaming at each other. I apologize. Yes, Carrie. What did you come up?
I didn't go your traditional way. I went through DEP's site, but chapter 78, 79, 91, 95, 102, and 105 all have regulations for
Okay.
oil and gas wells.
You see, she went through the agency website. That was one of my suggestions. Brilliant. So from the PA code website, I did oil, gas, well, environment research. You scroll through your hits, you find out through a variety of clicking that the main rate, well, let's see here. Let me just run it. I restricted my research to environmental protection, so Title 25. I searched Title 25 for oil, gas, environment protection. I find that Part 78 is dealing with oil wells, which you found. 78 is unconventional wells, whatever the heck those are. And then if you go into 78 and 78A, there's a section dealing with environment and protection of oil wells. So it's a bit clunky, but you can find all of this information not using Lexis and Westlaw. But then you'd also have to double check on the Pennsylvania Bulletin side to see if your Title 78 or your Title 78A has been updated or somehow changed since the official publication. So there's your two-step process using the government's website. So I think, oh wait, my pro tip, sorry. Number one, Carrie, agency websites are often a great place to start looking for regulations, because since it's their bailiwick, it would make sense that they would have the regulations under their purview listed there. Number two, while I don't necessarily use Lexis and Westlaw for regulatory research, I might go into their practice areas. So in energy and environment in Westlaw, they might have the regulations and regulatory agency, the regulatory courts, the EPA courts. They might be there on that one website there in Lexis or Westlaw. So practice areas are a good starting point as well. And then my final tip for regulations, I'll likely start my search at regulations.gov, or for federal government stuff in general, remember USA.gov. It's like an Uber index, and it's a great one-stop shopping center to at least get you started. Okay? And that's it, unless any of y'all have any questions. All right, brilliant. Well, thanks for coming, guys. And I hope to see you in advanced legal research in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks a
You
lot.
take care.